Welcome to the Unusual History of Everything, the podcast that uncovers the unusual history of everything around us. I'm Karen Lacey.
And I'm Melanie Dulles. On this episode, we're going to talk about the month that San Diego officials hired a moisture accelerator and almost drowned the city. It all began in 1915 during yet another drought affecting Southern California. The San Diego City Council, in a 4-1 vote, decided to hire a man named Charles Hatfield, a self-proclaimed moisture accelerator, to make it rain, and all for the low price of $10,000, to be paid only if he succeeded, of course. His chemical cocktail would soon prove too successful, and that's when everything began to go awry.
After the handshake deal with the city officials, Hatfield went to work building a 20-foot tower 60 miles east of the city near the Morena Reservoir. At the top of the tower, he placed a secret mix of chemicals in shallow iron pans and burned them. The heated chemicals shot into the sky like fireworks, with the smoke drifting into the clouds. On January 1st, 1916, after Hatfield worked his magic, the rain began in San Diego and continued without a break for the next 30 days.
That's crazy. Can you imagine?
Yeah. He did his job a little too well,
perhaps. Too well. I mean, at first they were probably like, oh my God, this is great, because it never rains here. We're in San Diego, dear listeners. But then after 30 days of nonstop rain, I'd be a little worried.
You know, the only time I've ever seen it like that here, living here for 20 years on my end, was that one time we had that flood.
Oh, I remember that.
It was it 2010, 2011, 2012, something like that? And I remember Fashion Valley Mall, which is this huge mall right off the freeway, was flooded. Mm-hmm. And it was just is this the end of the world?
Yeah, I got caught in that. I actually accidentally locked myself out of my condo, and I had my friend's huge golden retriever because we were at Dog Beach, and it just, the water started flooding down the streets, and we were trapped. We couldn't get anywhere. We couldn't go in anywhere. The streets were flooded. It was crazy. Well, at first, like we said, San Diegans were very excited about the light sprinkle that began on New Year's Day. But when, on January 15th, the steady sprinkle turned into a downpour that rivaled the one in the Bible and had no end in sight, the people started to panic. With an inch of rain falling every day, the San Diego River overflowed, causing floods that washed out roads, created landslides, lifted railroad tracks, and killed almost 50 people. Even power lines were washed away, and naval ships had to ferry people and supplies in and out of San Diego. The small agricultural community of Little Landers near San Isidro was wiped out completely. On January 27th, things got even worse. The stone dam at the lower Otay Reservoir gave way, sending a 40-foot wave to the coastline that took the lives of more than a dozen people and swept away all the trees, livestock, and houses in its path. Is that a tsunami then? 40-foot wave, or is that just a big tidal wave?
Well, a tsunami, I always thought it has to start as an earthquake somewhere, and then it builds into this crescendo.
Are you sure a tsunami has to start with an earthquake?
But, I mean, a dam giving way is essentially creating its own version of a tsunami. So I guess it is kind of like a version of a tsunami.
I wonder if a tsunami
but I think we call it a tidal wave, right?
Yeah, I think a tsunami maybe, I'm not sure, has to be a certain number of feet high, like 100 feet high, in order to be considered a tsunami, and everything under that's a tidal wave?
Perhaps.
I don't know. And a tidal wave just goes and goes shoosh, and there it is. But a tsunami drags out the water first and then comes back in, like a terror, right?
Right. Okay. So according to NOAA, the national...
I was thinking Noah's Ark. I was like, wait a minute. How did you get a hold of him?
No, the national...
Give me his number.
The National Ocean Service.
Okay,
NOAA.
Yeah.
Okay, so a tidal wave is a regular reoccurring shallow water wave caused by effects of gravitational interactions between the sun, the moon, and the earth and the ocean. So that is a tidal wave.
It doesn't say anything how tall it needs to be?
No, it just said it's a normal wave.
Okay.
But sometimes it's bigger because of the moon and the sun or whatever. So people sometimes get them confused and use a tidal wave in reference to a tsunami, but they're not the same thing because tsunamis have absolutely nothing to do with the tides. So basically, I would say this would be a tsunami.
Well, I played it safe and said it was just a 40-foot wave.
Yes.
Just a big wave.
Yeah. No, it's super big wave.
Super big, possibly a tsunami.
And I think the other thing is tsunamis are usually like in the ocean, and this would have been in the river.
No, this was
because of the dam.
Oh, the lower Otay
like,
Reservoir was that's the river. That's the San Diego River, and not the ocean. Look it up. Google it.
You wouldn't dam an ocean.
Oh, is that where the reservoir? Yeah.
Because it's fresh water.
Google it just to make sure.
Google it just to make sure.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. I was going to.
All right. Okay, yeah, it's a dam.
We digress.
We digress.
But basically, there was a really big wave.
It was a big wave.
And it wiped out things. Similar to a tsunami.
But not.
So a few days later, the rain, or Hatfield's flood, as people began calling it, stopped. And Hatfield made his way back to San Diego to collect payment for a job well done. Unfortunately, the city officials were being sued by hundreds of people for damages, and the city attorney at the time, Terrence Cosgrove, refused to pay Hatfield, saying that if they did, it would look like the city was admitting that they caused the flood and therefore should pay for everyone's damages. Cosgrove also stated that since there was no written contract and Hatfield couldn't prove the rain wasn't just an act of God, the city didn't have to pay. Of course, Hatfield was not pleased at all and sued the city. So he became one of the others that were suing the city, right? And a lawsuit that came forward dragged for almost 20 years and was dismissed in 1938. Hatfield never got paid. The moral here, folks, is always get a signed contract before services are rendered.
Right?
Handshake deals are not real deals.
No. Well, there are many questions that arise after hearing that story, at least in my head. I don't know. Like, what the heck did Hatfield use to cause rain? Is this type of thing still done today? And is it a good idea to play with the weather? I mean, there are a dozen or more movies about this type of thing going really, really wrong. Snowpiercer being one of them. Have you ever seen that?
Of course I have.
I mean, it's not about rain, but it was about like climate control.
Yeah, it was
kind
about
of like
people
cooling down the earth.
Yeah, it was about people trying to affect the climate and do something.
By putting
something in the atmosphere.
By putting chemicals in the atmosphere to cool down the earth because of climate change. Now, the movie Snowpiercer, I believe, came out like in 2012
I haven't seen the movie,
like
but I saw the recent TV show.
Yeah, the TV show is based on the movie, and they do a phenomenal job. A guy I was good friends in high school with, John Woo, actually is one of the writers for that show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
cool.
he's so awesome. He's in LA. Hey, John, if you're listening, shout out. Okay, so anyway, lots of movies proving that you probably shouldn't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you should just not mess with the climate. Even if you think you're doing the right thing, Mother Nature can be very fickle at times when you're trying to mess with her.
Right, exactly. It's a little scary. Well, anyway, the answers to those questions that I just posed in order are, it's a secret, yes, and no, in case you're wondering. No one knows what Hatfield used to make it rain, as he took the secret formula to his grave. He was not a scientist. He was actually a sewing machine salesman, but he was interested in science. He grew up in Bonsall on a ranch where he began experimenting with rainmaking on top of a windmill. By 1904, he believed the 23 chemicals he mixed together and sent into the air attracted clouds, which then caused rain. He believed it so much that he was able to convince some of California's desperate, drought-ridden farmers that he could do it. His first attempt was in LA, where he brought more than 18 inches of rain down, and this made everyone take notice of him all around the country. He continued to bring rain on demand even after the San Diego debacle for Cuba, Honduras, Canada, and various areas of California, and actually various areas of the United States.
Well, yes, I read a number of times where he was in Texas, by the way. A couple of places I've actually been to. One of them was Post.
Oh, we're going to talk about Texas later, too, because there's some interesting things that they do down there.
Well, yeah, and Post was like the town with the cereal guy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Very
talk
cool.
about that in a minute.
Well, Hatfield's business ended during the Great Depression, and he died taking his secret formula with him. So we're never going to know exactly, but we can, I don't know. We're never going to know exactly.
And he was still never paid by San Diego.
No, he never got paid.
He did sue them, and then he complained about it for like the rest of his life.
Yeah. Other people paid him, but not San Diego.
Just because we don't know exactly what Hatfield used doesn't mean we can't guess. Scientists and pseudoscientists have been experimenting with rainmaking for years prior to Hatfield coming on the scene. In fact, the idea of trying to control the weather goes all the way back to ancient Greece, of course, Melanie, where watchmen literally stood guard over the skies and alerted the people as soon as it began to hail. Why? Well, so that the people could sacrifice some animals in order to stave off the storm.
Of course. Duh.
But James Pollard Espy, a meteorologist, is considered the founding father of American rainmaking. In his book, The Philosophy of Storms, published in 1841, Espy claimed that by moving humid air across currents upward into the cooler layers of the atmosphere, condensation would occur, and rain could be artificially induced. This sounds more logical than the ancient Greek philosopher Plutarch's theory of shock and awe, which states that extraordinary rains generally fall after great battles. Espy called it his thermal theory of storms and tested it by setting forest fires in order to create massive updrafts. The experiments failed, however, and sent his theory up in flames along with all those poor trees and all the oxygen that they would have produced.
Oh my God, dummies.
Well, I mean, sometimes you got to experiment, right? Although burning a whole forest, I'm not really a big fan of that.
I'm surprised people let him do it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
All those poor like leprechauns and fairies.
Oh, I know.
Those creatures that were living in the forest and the animals and whatnot. Gnomes.
Rainmaking may seem like an unusual way to solve a drought problem, but there is some actual science behind it that is still being experimented with today. There's something called cloud seeding, which is what Hatfield was attempting to do, where chemicals such as dry ice and silver iodide act as condensation nuclei or ice nuclei and are shot up into the clouds in order to induce rain. What happens is the chemical particles allow water vapor to attach to them, and when they get big enough, they fall from the clouds. This condensation process generates heat, which causes air to rise, and the idea is that this will grow more clouds that will produce more rain.
The idea of using dry ice or frozen carbon dioxide came about in 1946 when American chemist and meteorologist Vincent J. Schaefer and Nobel laureate Irving Langmuir of the General Electric Research Laboratories in New York began experimenting with weather modification. In an experiment known as Project Cyrus, a joint venture of GE and the U.S. military, the men took a deep freeze box filled with clouds of water droplets and dropped ice pellets onto it, which caused the droplets to quickly turn into ice crystals. And these crystals grew and fell to the bottom of the box. But what was Hatfield burning? Well, you can also use silver iodine and lead iodine to seed clouds. When burned, they create a smoke of tiny particles that produce ice crystals in supercooled clouds below, -5 degrees Celsius. The water vapor attaches to the iodide crystals and falls.
There have been some pretty interesting experiments around rainmaking. For example, in 1871, a civil engineer from Chicago named Edward Powers believed rain was caused by loud noises. To test his theory, he teamed up with a Texas rancher and former Confederate general named Daniel Ruggles to stimulate rain by sending balloons full of dynamite and gunpowder into the sky and detonating them. You crazy Texans, Karen.
You know, you're laughing about that, but Post did the same thing.
I know.
He, basically had a whole bunch of bombs that went off.
That's nuts.
And, the loud explosions, but he did it on the ground.
Seems perfectly safe. Well, unfortunately, the only thing those experiments produced were frightened onlookers who were still reeling from the wars.
I know, right? Talk about PTSD right there.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
God, you're probably getting triple PTSD because not only are you remembering cannon fire or gunfire, from being a veteran, but you're also now scaring the children.
And the dogs.
And the dogs and the birds and whoever else is around to be oh, here, let's do some more bombs.
Whenever there's thunder, I get scared. I can't imagine how I would react if this was going on in my neighborhood. I can't even imagine. So Congress, here's another one. Congress spent nearly $20,000 on rainmaking, assigning Civil War veteran Robert St. George Dyrenforth to oversee the experiments, which took place in Texas.
There's a lot of testing going. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of land.
There's a lot of land there.
And it can be really dry there.
Playing off Powers' theory, Dyrenforth, a patent lawyer, thought maybe fireworks was the way to go. So in the summer of 1891, he sent up into the sky 60 makeshift guns, kites with explosives attached to them, and balloons that contained a combustible mix of hydrogen and oxygen to entice the clouds to produce rain. Unfortunately, these experiments only set fires on the drought-stricken land below.
See, here's my thing. So this all happened in Texas, and I've given you an example of Post doing this.
Yeah.
You've said this Drydenforth guy, as well as this Powers
Ruggles
person
and Powers,
Ruggles.
yeah.
Like all of these people, they're all in Texas. It's, yes, it's a big state, but they're all using things with like explosives. It's like you'd think that, why aren't you looking at the information that others are putting out there to say, you know what, this doesn't actually work.
Well, they were like loud noises.
So
Like
they're
the
just
theory of
basically-
shock and awe probably too,
It's definitely, it's like
but
one
how
thing.
about not gunshots and explosives? How about, okay, you want a loud noise? Like put a radio transmitter on these weather balloons or
I don't
what do
think
they
they
call
had.
it?
They didn't quite have some of that stuff this early on. But Post would have had it.
What year was this? This was
Well, some of this was like the late the 1800s.
1891. They could have put a microphone or megaphone or something. They must have had they had megaphones up there and just been like yelling really loud and like making loud noises, yelling at the clouds. Rain, right?
Rain, come
In the
come-
megaphone.
Come today. Yeah, I don't think they had.
No. Or clap really loud, like that in the megaphone.
Right, like
I
hands
bet
across.
that was loud, wasn't it?
Like hands across below would just start clapping really loudly and
Yes.
see. Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, did they try it? How do you know?
Maybe they did try it. They're trying all this other crazy stuff.
No, I don't know.
Well, anyway, others attempted rainmaking, burning secret formulas of chemicals, but nothing really seemed to work. In 1921, the U.S. Army Secret Service, why did I make them secret?
I don't know. Well, because it's secret stuff.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't known.
Right. In 1921, the U.S. Army Air Service tried to make rain from electrified sand. An inventor named L. Francis Warren theorized that if electricity-charged sand was sprinkled from the sky, it could not only produce rain, but it could also break up the clouds, which meant clearing fog. Working with the Air Service, they sent airplanes up above the clouds and had them drop large quantities of electrically charged sand onto them. Of course, this didn't work either, but it proved to be a hair-raising experience for the people below.
Static. Can you imagine? You're just sitting there in your backyard, you're just getting a tan or whatever.
And then a whole bunch of sand
All
gets
this
dumped on
sand
you.
gets dumped on you, and it's static electricity, right? It's electrically charged. So when it hits you, it's like little zaps, zzz, like all over your body.
A bunch of shocks or whatever. I'm sorry. I know that this is sand falling on you, but my brain is going immediately to the end of Ghostbusters, the first one, where that guy, I can't remember his name, but like he was not the cool guy who was trying to shut the
Venkman?
No, the one that was trying to shut them down.
Oh, the guy with the red hair.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And
his
I
name.
remember at the end, he like goes, no, like, oh, everybody else won and I lost because I'm so not cool. And then that whole bunch of like the white slime just comes buckets down on
It's
him.
like the marshmallow guy, right? Stay puffed marshmallow
Yeah,
man,
like the
exploded all
timing
over
is
him.
completely off for that to just randomly happen, but it's a beautiful end to his story arc within the
It is.
Ghostbusters movie.
Well, and that is what would happen. That's how I picture the electrically charged sand being dumped on you. It's like just all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden, oh, look, sand. Some little kids out in the front yard. Mommy, I want to go to the beach today. Yay!
Oh my God. Well, moisture accelerators are even today making a profit, if you can believe it. A company out of Florida called Rain on Request uses eco-friendly rain-inducing technology that they developed in Israel to make it rain. Their success is based on ionizing the atmosphere by building one large tower and 8 smaller satellite towers. But are these so-called moisture accelerators really making it rain, or could they just be hustling the masses by doing their work during a dry spell and paying attention to weather patterns and the timing of impending rainfall? Hatfield, in particular, was knowledgeable in meteorology, and so could have very easily examined storm fronts in order to target cities that were about to have some rain, then take all the credit. It sounds a bit shady, but a 2014 report from the World Meteorological blub.
You can do it. I believe in you.
A report from this organization
Just try it again.
for the World Meteorological. That doesn't sound right. Meteorological. All right, you guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, they found that 52 countries had active cloud seeding programs, and get this, 39 weather modification programs are in place west of the Mississippi River. Like in America. Did we know that? Does anybody else know that? What are they doing? We should visit.
Maybe that's why we're having all this crazy weather out here in San Diego. Like our summers sometimes seem to be hotter longer, and then when it's raining longer. Maybe it's because people
we haven't seen the sun in like 3 weeks over here.
I know. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Sunny San Diego is not so sunny.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's not like...
It's not over here anyway in Point Loma, but...
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's people are seeding in other places and they're messing with the weather.
They are, which might explain the flooding that part of the country always gets. They're trying to make it rain all the time. Well, guess what? They have a lot of floods in that area. Not all year, but like in certain parts of the year. Every time I fly through Texas, I'm delayed because of the freaking rain.
Yeah, well, you know what, though? When I grew up in Texas many, many years ago, we always had rain on a daily basis. And now when I go and visit my hometown, it doesn't rain very often. Maybe one day. And I used to go there and it'd be raining for like a week. Or it would rain every day in the morning and be dry in the afternoon. It doesn't really do that. The weather's different where I grew up. And the weather's different just since I've been in San Diego.
People are experimenting, I'm telling you. I mean, this is a little off topic, sort of. But what's his name? Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. He, this month, has sent over Sweden a bunch of weather balloons because his whole thing is like, we need to cool down the earth. Snowpiercer. I mean, seriously, did he not see any of these movies or TV shows? Idiot. He wants to cool down the earth by sending, I think it's something like calcium carbonate or whatever into the atmosphere, which will, because that, if I'm right in saying calcium carbonate, the particles deflect the sun's rays away from the earth. So he wants to not
Why would you do that in Sweden?
Well, Sweden is the only country that will allow him to do testing.
They shouldn't be doing it at all.
They're doing it over there to see if it'll work. And then if it does work and cools down the atmosphere, he wants to do it all over the world. Snowpiercer.
Is this to slow down climate change?
To cool down the earth because of climate change. The earth is getting too hot.
Right.
Which basically, if anybody pays attention to cyclical weather patterns throughout the millions of years of Earth, they would see that it does this.
Yeah, no, well...
it gets bad and then it cools down.
Yeah, I mean, we can have this whole conversation about
Can we
climate
not
change.
Play with it, please? Yeah. I don't want to... I hate being cold.
Well, we are...
Listen, I know I brought up Snowpiercer a gazillion times and it's annoying, but it's a fear of mine.
You know what? I have to say, like, we know that climate change is a thing, but we also know that it is cyclical. We're probably speeding it up just by our actions. I mean, more than definitely, likely.
Sure.
I mean, look at what we talked about when we talked about epidemics and the Little Ice Age and how that was probably, a factor and all that other stuff. So yeah, I would say we can definitely affect the climate, but let's not force its hand. We want to slow it down. We're probably just going to speed it up on accident. So, because we don't understand it, I don't think in the way that in the world kind of way that we really need to. We understand it in little places and in little ways.
We need to send Bill Gates a link to our episode here so he can listen to us.
No, just more like, please don't test any things with the climate. I mean, we know that we've messed up with all the different things going on, probably, but that doesn't mean that this is the way to affect change is by messing with Mother Nature. I always feel like just messing with Mother Nature, no matter what, is probably not the best idea.
Agreed.
You would think that San Diego had learned its lesson back in 1916, but the production of rain in other cities by other moisture accelerators left them jealous and desperate to end their yearly droughts. In 1961, they almost hired a man named Edmund Jeffrey who promised to make it rain 40 inches in 40 days for only $8,000. Hey, it's cheaper than Hatfield. Fortunately, San Diego's city council still had visions of Hatfield's flood fresh in their minds and turned down his offer.
Smart. Every time one of us says make it rain, all I can think of is like the money when you're like, make it rain, and all the dollar bills are like flying from your palms.
That brings us to the end of our episode.
Thank God.
You can follow The Unusual History of Everything podcast on Instagram at The Unusual History of Everything and on Facebook at The Unusual History of Everything podcast. And find our show notes on www.musecuratorial.com. The Unusual History of Everything is written, produced, and directed by Melanie Dellis and Karen Lacey.
New episodes air every Tuesday on all podcast outlets. Be sure to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. You can also see photos from our episodes and more on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Melanie Dellis.
And I'm Karen Lacey, your host for The Unusual History of Everything.